Okay. Okay. So we just got done talking a little bit about just this battle between different opinions and different ideologies. That was the opener, right? So now we're going to be going into the Cold War and essentially what this war was. First off, it really wasn't much of a war in the way that most people think of a war. It's a very different type of war. And so to go back a little bit, before we go into the Cold War, let's back up a little bit into World War II just really fast. So during World War II, there was a beautiful man. I say this very sarcastically. There was a beautiful man by the name of Vladimir Lenin, who he, above everything, loved the idea of what communism was. And so let's go back to World War I. Sorry, that's what I meant. So Germany's plan during World War I was to essentially get Vladimir Lenin on a train. And literally Germany thought, if we can get this man to cause so much chaos within the Soviet Union, well, actually, Russia at the time, then Soviet Union after Lenin takes over. If we can cause Russia so much discourse, we can get them out of the war, and we can start focusing on our battles towards the west of France. And so they put him on a train. They put him up to Russia. He essentially turned the entire nation into communism. He broke the economy, caused a massive famine, and basically starved a lot of people. Communism. It's wonderful, right? Beautiful. Right? So the revolution that turned this entire nation into the Soviet Union, it was known as the October Revolution on November 7th of 1917. Or, as a lot of people know it, the Bolshevik Revolution. Which, if you didn't know, Bolshevik means the majority. Which was ironic because when he was in the Communist Party in Europe at the time, he was in the majority, but the majority was the minority. And the minority was the majority. Yeah, I know, it's weird, right? Yeah, exactly. So after this, and after World War II, so World War I, then World War II, still the Soviet Union, still communist, and then after World War II, now we're at the point where we have a man by the name of Joseph Stalin that takes over the Soviet Union. And what Joseph Stalin does is after World War II, like I mentioned last year, the Soviet Union started preoccupying their taken over territories versus letting them become nations. And this is where this idea of the Eastern Bloc that comes in. So these states that were bordering the Soviet Union were now essentially communist puppet states that were established after World War II, that Stalin was supposed to help reestablish the eastern part of Europe. And so Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or Great Britain at the time, in his famous speech, one of the many things that he declared at this point was the idea of now an Iron Curtain has now ascended on Europe, proclaiming that these new nations, all the way down that bordered the Soviet Union, are now communist states, or puppet states to the Soviet Union. And so the relationship between the Soviet Union and the United Nations, US, France, Great Britain, and a bunch of other nations, started deteriorating. Because now we are in an ideology battle between two things. Capitalism, which is what the Allies favored, and communism, what the East favored. So, what is the big difference? What's the difference between these two ideologies? So communism is this idea of all people are essentially equal, that there should be no private ownership, and that the workers should control the mass production of within a facility, whether it be a business, whether it be the government, whether it be anything of a practice. There is equality. And so some of these characteristics of this goes to, the credit when it comes to these things is not based off of the individual. It's based off of the state. The individualism is based off of this identity with the state. You know, there's a heavy progressive income tax. Because there's more representation with the state, there has to be some sort of tax that is implemented within the state itself. How do you get funding and money from that? From those businesses. And you tax them incredibly. So there's equal liability for all labor and establishments. So like I said, going back to this idea of equality, you and me, Stephen, we are now the same. You and me, Preston, you and I are the same. We are not individuals. We are a contribution to the business and now to the state. And our identity relies with the state, not within ourselves. Everyone collects benefits of the state or community, and then the government controls the economy. So, like I said before, there is a lot of government and regulations. There is less individualism, and it's now your identity relies within the state. How do you think Americans probably feel about that?
Not so hot.
Denied, not so hot. Yeah, not a lot of people did, especially within the ideology of communism and why people were scared of it, because we value our individualism. We value our opinions. So, now, going to the opposite, what is capitalism? I'm sure many of you guys have heard of it, and I'm sure many of you guys have parents who own businesses. So, capitalism falls under this idea of companies or private companies that own entrepreneurship, goods, natural resources, and labor production. There is more freedom to essentially make choices when it comes to your business, or when it comes to your own entrepreneurship, your partnerships, your goods. There's more choice, and there is more freedom for your business at that point. And so there's ownership of the free market. You can basically set up a business, and you can operate within that business. And whether it be in a marketplace like meat, whether it be electronics, whether it be war, because there's a market for war, you can operate freely within that market. And you can do basically what you want and make those choices. Is every choice going to be good? No. Is every choice going to be bad though? Not entirely. So this ideology encourages competition. Now that there is more competition, that's going to be a motivating factor to making better products. And that is something a lot of people can get onto. So there's minimum government involvement. Government is outside of the economy. They might help and create policies, but they are not directly involved in it. And then supply and demand are influenced by business behaviors. They're influenced based off of what businesses do within their own corporations. Like I said, going back to the idea of free choice. And then lastly, like I said before, choices when it comes to prices, wages, and profits. You can now have a choice when it comes to these ideologies. So there's two things here: less government involvement and individualism. You still have the spectrum of choice. Does that sound familiar? Because it's a lot of ideologies that we hold within the United States. That's a big reason why a lot of people encourage many aspects of capitalism. Is it a concrete ideology? No, it's not. Is it something that's effective? We've seen how effective it is. Absolutely. Within the United States and within different European nations. So that's the big two ideologies that we are talking about when we go further into communism. I'm sorry, not communism. We are going into the Cold War. Those are the two ideologies that we are going to be facing. There's a lot of information. How are we doing so far? Questions, comments, concerns?